Welcome to another episode of Corporate CPR, where we breathe life back into your organization, projects, and processes, giving you insights to recovery and avoiding corporate mortality events. Today, we'll be talking about how you have control over your organization's predictability and how that is a measure of success. And joining us to contribute to the conversation is Luis Scott. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. Really excited.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit about your background?
Absolutely. So my background is in law, and I've been in the legal industry for about 20 years. And in that time period, I've gone from reception to becoming a managing partner of a firm. And then I went and started a law firm as well. And so now today I teach people how to grow their law firms and really just any service-based business, and how to grow a law firm that creates predictability for them, or grow a service-based business that creates predictability for them and their families and their legacy.
So let's talk about a little bit about predictability. Predictability sounds boring. It sounds like, oh, well, what do you mean? We want to use this AI and we want to do all these things that are full of change. But what are we talking about when we're talking about predictability, and what's important about it?
One of the things that I've learned, especially working with a lot of people, is that nobody likes to ride the financial roller coaster. It doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur, if you're working in a company, no matter where you are in life, all of us want that sense of peace of mind that tomorrow is not a guessing game, that, being able to take care of my household and my family, being able to pay the bills is something that's a given. And so learning that, I realized that there's so many people out there that didn't know how to create predictability in their business, didn't know how to create predictability in the output that they got from the work that they put in. And there's nothing more frustrating, whether you're an employer or entrepreneur, to putting in time, energy, effort, and not knowing that that's going to lead to a true beneficial outcome for you and your family. And so predictability to me is what I call the ultimate peace of mind. If you can create predictability in your finances, if you can create predictability in the outcomes that you are going to have from the work that you're doing, then you're going to have the tremendous peace of mind in life. And there's nothing better than sleeping at night, not having to worry about taking care of your bills or your family the next day.
I find one thing that I think about because we're a growing company, and this but could be related to some larger companies who Jim Collins talks about like the 10,000 mile march or something, and it's like taking every step, in unison and moving forward, and it does take time to get there, but it's that structure and formation that's moving us forward to the outcome. And that oftentimes we don't see the results that we're after right away, and so we're always constantly changing what we're trying to do. And I wonder if sometimes we change too much, that some things are maybe more simple than we realize, where if you have a marketing plan and you execute it, if you repeatedly execute, it takes a while before you actually see those results, so they're not always instantaneous. Do you have?
I don't think they're ever instantaneous. I mean, the phrase of "it takes 10 years to become an overnight success" is absolutely true, no matter what endeavor you're in. And I recently read a book. I say recently, it's probably within the last year, by Dr. Angela Duckworth. It's the book called Grit, where she talks about how grit is, and I'm paraphrasing, and so it's not exactly this, but this is kind of my interpretation, is like being able to do the monotonous for an extended period of time without losing enthusiasm. Again, that's a paraphrase. I don't think she actually said that in the book, but that's what I got. It's like, being able to be gritty in your life is how you achieve that predictability. Because if you want long-term predictability, you're not going to be able to achieve it in a short-term behavioral change or in short-term action. It takes being able to do the monotonous for an extended period of time. And to me, that's what life is really all about, is finding that one passion that you love, that you are willing to wake up every day and do over and over and over. And if you do it well, you will be rewarded.
So what are some of those key measures of predictability that you really focus on then, or that organizations should really be focused on?
I mean, I think that the organizations should be focused on, let's say you're a smaller company, you should be focused on creating predictable leads. I have this a funnel that I teach, and it's you want to start by creating predictable awareness in the marketplace, and that awareness should create predictable leads, and that lead should create predictable sales, and sales should create predictable work, and work should create predictable systems that need to produce the work, and it should create a predictable hiring funnel, and that should create predictable revenue, and revenue should ultimately create predictable profits. So like that's the funnel that I teach people. And so it all starts with the marketing at the very top and ends with hopefully profitability at the very bottom. But I think that even applies to the individual. It's not just a company predictability. An individual in a company can become more predictable by waking up at the same time every day, making sure that they have a routine. I'm a big fan of a routine. I get up every morning at 5 a.m. and I go to the gym and I come home and then I read and then I drink my coffee and then I get ready and then I go to drive to work. It's 35 minutes to work. I listen to either a podcast or two short books that you can listen to on one of these apps, and then I go to work, and then I have a predictable lunch. And some people may say that that's super boring, but I believe that the key to success is creating the routine that serves you instead of living a life of just happenstance, of like being intentional in your routine. And the more intentional you are in your routine as an individual, the more predictability you're going to have in that outcome. And that goes for a company as well.
Where have you ever come across a time though in your company where maybe you didn't narrow in on the right routine and actually needed to pivot? And if so, how do you identify when it's time to pivot versus when to just, keep moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably one of the hardest parts about just life in general, is that it's just a series of pivots in your life, and knowing when to pivot is the hardest thing. I remember in my last company before I left, I spent probably 2 or 3 years wondering, should I leave or should I stay? Should I leave or should I stay?
Mm.
Should I, should I go out on my own? I kept wondering that and wondering it. And then fortunately for me, I got fired. So like that helped me make the move really easily, And so it is really hard to make the pivot because we don't know if we're giving up too soon, or if we're making a mistake. And I think I've narrowed that concept down to the following thing, and that is when you no longer find any satisfaction in what you're doing, when your company no longer finds the outcome that they want in what they're doing, so whether it's a person or a company, then they should really analyze what is being done and ask whether they should move in another direction. And so if you take a company and you are marketing and that marketing is not leading to any result that is satisfactory, then you should really ask yourself, should I pivot on the marketing that I'm doing? If you're doing something in your personal life that's not bringing that personal satisfaction, that's not bringing that joy in your life, that's not actually leading to you progressing as an individual, maybe you should pivot in your life. Now, how much time do you give to it? Well, it depends on how much time you can stand doing the activity. And I think that in a company's case, the driver is that if you're doing something wrong for too long, it's going to cost you a tremendous amount of money. And if you know that the burn rate, we call this the burn rate analysis. At what point do you get to zero, that you spend so much money that you end up at, bankrupt? You can't go to zero. So you got to figure out where in that process you need to go ahead and pivot before you get to zero. And I think the same thing happens with an individual. You can't get your energy level to zero. You have to be willing to pivot before your energy gets to zero. Because once you have given up all hope, it's very unlikely that you can actually continue to progress. You're gonna need that energy boost again.
Yeah, stop preventing the mortality event. Um, so you mentioned the marketing to revenue funnel, and obviously, that's a real key for a company to be successful. But there are other pieces of the operation though that really impact that. So, what are some of the other areas of predictability that you really need to be building into the organization?
I think that in the operational component, you have to be building systems that serve the client well. And I'm going to use the example of a law firm who's delivering a legal service. In that legal service, there's a lot of mundane tasks that are happening, and you have to process the claim correctly. You have to file the claim correctly. There's a period of discovery, which are interrogatories and depositions, the pre-trial stuff. All that stuff happens routinely in a case, and you have to figure out a way to create an efficient system for making that happen at a low cost. And so if you want a predictable outcome in the legal space, you want to make sure that you don't have people in your business doing things differently. Like you can't have one person doing it one way and another person doing it another way, because it's not going to lead to any kind of predictable outcome. So I think stabilizing the operations by having systems, policies, and procedures that let people know what it is that you're expecting and what is the standard that this business is going to have. You know, I always relate things to like sports teams or to businesses. The standard for Walmart is different than the standard for Target, and it's different than the standard for Nordstrom. It's different than the standard for Louis Vuitton, right? They have different standards, and the employees could actually work in all those places. One person could work in all those places, but they need to adhere to the standards of that company, and the company is responsible for educating them in those standards. And so I think the way you create predictability in the outcomes in your operations is making sure that the company is educating people properly and training people properly on the standards that they expect, so that the customer receives the benefit of those standards, receives the service level that they're paying for.
Hmm. And how, how much how much focus should leadership have on, like, is it every level of leadership that's involved in this? And then what are the qualities that make somebody really good at helping companies be predictable?
I mean, I think that leadership is probably the single greatest predictor of a scalable business. If you look at any of the big businesses, when they fail, they many times they fail because of some leadership mistake at the top. Disney's a good example of this. Recently, the CEO left, and they got a new CEO. He made some decisions that were not exactly, good decisions. The next thing you know, ousted, the old CEO's back. It's like leadership at the top plays a massive part at the success of a business, whether it's a huge corporation or even a small mom and pop shop. And so I think it starts with the biggest leader first, identifying what is the vision that's needed for the business, what is the mission, how are we going to accomplish it, what is the strategy for us succeeding. And I think it's then translating that to the next level of leaders, what the executives in the organization. Today, my personal law firm, with almost 200 employees, we have an executive team. They're responsible for carrying that vision at the operational and tactical level. They're responsible for making sure that they execute properly in the business. And so that's the next level of leadership that needs to be trained. But from there, we need to take it to the mid-level managers and then the managers below them. So that way, every single person feels the touch of the CEO, feels the touch of the organization. I think if you look at a lot of companies like Amazon, for instance, the person in the warehouse, I don't think that they really understand the vision of the CEO. And we know this not because this is not a subjective thing. We know this because like Amazon loses 20,000 employees a month, right? So like there's a real disconnect between the lower level employees, and I say lower level only in the sense of what their job function is, not that they're low level people, but lower level employees are not really connected to the vision of the top leadership. And so it is hard the deeper you go to translate that. And that's why having an emphasis in leadership is so critical, because the more you emphasize the vision, the mission, the outcomes that you're expecting, the standards you're expecting, and the better you are at translating that every single level of the leadership down, the better it is that your organization is going to function, the better your people are going to feel about working for the organization, and the better outcomes that the customer is going to receive at the end of the day.
Yeah, obviously with some of those organizations and their size, it becomes difficult. So have you seen things that work really well to start translating that vision down? Because I think of companies, I don't know, like say T-Mobile's turnover rate, but I know when their old CEO, John, can't remember his last name at the moment, it seemed like a lot of people were connected to him, kind of like a Steve Jobs, right? Like he was one that a lot of people, a lot of his people were excited to get behind. So what makes him or a Jobs or, those type of leaders really get that message permeated through the entire company so that they're all swimming in the same direction?
I heard on a podcast recently that the way that you get people engaged is having a vision so big, a dream so big, a business so big that other people's dreams and visions for their life can be achieved within your organization. And I think that, a polarizing leader today who may not have been prior to buying Twitter is Elon Musk, right? Like there, when Elon Musk did any movement, people were like, I want to go work for him. I want to go work for Tesla. I want to work for the rocket ship. I need the chip in my head, and he moves to Texas and everybody wants to, move over there to Texas. And I think he became a little bit more politicized after he bought Twitter. But I think it's having that magnetic personality. Steve Jobs is a great example of that, having that magnetic personality. And that doesn't mean to be charismatic, right? Because I think Warren Buffett also has that magnetic personality. I mean, 40,000 people fly every year to go to his conference. He does this auction lunch where I think the most recent auction lunch was like $4 or $5 million to have a 2-hour lunch with this guy, right? So I think it's creating a business and a vision so big where people say, you know what, if I just link arms with that person, I'm going to be able to achieve my dreams and goals. And I think what happens is organizations grow, and I'm guilty of this, and I have no Amazon, right? I mean, they're a big organization, but as organizations grow, owners of the company tend to stray from what they did initially to get that support. In the early days, everyone matters so much. I mean, you just love on everyone, their spouse and their kids, and what their family, what they love to do. And then as you get bigger and bigger, the next thing you know, you don't even know the receptionist anymore. You don't know their name. You don't know how long they've worked there. You don't know anything about them. So it's really hard for them to be connected to you when that's the case. And so I think the way that you keep this really going and you get the people who are deeper and deeper in the organization to be bought in is that you create a magnetism where the leaders themselves who lead the lower level employees are actually deeply tied to the vision and mission and can translate that to the lower organizations. With that said, it's super hard to do. And it's evident by the fact that these big companies have a hard time doing it because relationships are complicated, just on their face, right? They're just very complicated.
One of the challenges with large companies who are having success is when you have success, obviously you've got money. And so there's not a lot of pressure necessarily to have the same level of focus on every detail as you did maybe when it was a smaller company or during hard times. And so processes can often break down and become very inefficient and, or they'll put in layers of hierarchy that make them inefficient. So when we're talking about predictability here, how would you recommend a large company not maybe get complacent in some of that and really look at those internal processes to drive to get to the next level of success, right? Or prepare for maybe when you do go back to hard times, you're already prepared for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really comes down to desire of the leadership and the intention of the leadership. And you're absolutely right. As you get bigger, there is more resources to avoid the problem by just saying we're just going to make more revenue. It doesn't really matter if that gets efficient or not. And I think that's probably what happened to Kmart, right? They lost sight of the details. I remember going into Kmart when it was still alive and just thinking to myself, there are like tiles coming off the floor. I mean, you would walk into a Kmart and there were tiles missing on the floor. Like, you want to talk about missing details. And I think that when they strayed away from those details, it really negatively impacted them. I think about Chick-fil-A. I don't know if Chick-fil-A is in every state, but I know in the state of Georgia, I mean, it is basically like churches. They're on every single corner. And Chick-fil-A, they focus on the details. If you're a mother with a baby, they're going to have diapers there, hand sanitizers, they're going to have mats for you to eat, and they're going to deliver the food to your table. You don't even have to carry your own food. And they're going to get you the sauces, and they're going to wait. I mean, that's how you focus on the details. And that really starts at the highest leadership level, really caring about the customer experience. And I have a friend of mine who actually owns a Chick-fil-A, and he one time told me the first customer is the employee. If the leader does not first care about the number one customer in the business, they're not going to care about the number two customer in the business. And so it starts with the leader really caring, and I have a business partner in the law firm who is extremely committed to the details of everything in the business. In fact, when we moved into our new office, he was intimately involved in the design of the office and the way things really looked and the experience that the client would have coming into the office, and also the experience that the employees would have coming into the office. And I think if you don't have that commitment from the highest levels, it's really hard to create that predictability throughout the organization, because money will become the obstacle to excellence. And I think that that's what happens a lot of times, is that money becomes the obstacle to really being excellent, because you no longer have to be excellent when your company gets to a really, really massive size, because people become so dependent on the product that you don't have to necessarily be excellent.
Right. And that's where I guess to Jim Collins' follow-on book, right? How the mighty fail or something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
You start to deviate from those things and you lose massive market share. You touched on a couple of things. I think one of the things Kmart did though, as well, is they lost their identity. They forgot who they were. So they tried to compete against Walmart on price, and they tried to compete against Target on quality. And they couldn't do either one of them well. And so therefore they were kind of lost in the middle, right? Like they needed to land on what their differentiator was and then align all of that to it. And then you're right. And then the pride, right? The pride in your organization. It's funny, you're talking about tiles. Like one of the things I do when I go to stores, I actually look at the ceiling. And if the ceilings are dirty, I actually don't really want to shop there, because, there's a lack of attention to detail. You're not taking the time. And then Chick-fil-A, I always say I learned the most about business when I worked for Chick-fil-A, even more than my degree in international business. And it was that focus on the customer, and the leaders did focus on us, and they took care of us, and and that work-life balance, whether you're religious or not, having a known day off where you got that Sunday off, and just the development. And the thing that really spoke to me when I was at Chick-fil-A is we also got instantly rewarded for improving. So, our boss would set us this reward. If you can memorize all the description of all the food products, you get a quarter raise. And a quarter raise at that time was, pretty good. Or if you achieve this milestone, you get a raise. And it was very much like, you didn't have to wait 6 months or a year or whatever. It was very, do this, you get that. And the things that we had to do ultimately helped the client. Or the customer, sorry. I'm so used to saying clients now. And so it was a really, really great experience for me. But what it does, I think, is create that tribe-like culture, right? And that was something that Disney used to be really good at. They had the tribe. Nordstrom's had their tribe-like culture within their companies, where everybody knew they were all marching to the same drum. They were all headed the same direction, and they all knew what their mission was on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and by the way, you said client for Chick-fil-A. I mean, you kind of have a long-standing relationship with Chick-fil-A, so you're kind of a client. I mean, you're that's the way
they get the most of my restaurant dollars, that's for sure.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's insane. But I mean, I think everything that you're saying is absolutely spot on, and it's like it's treating it's building people. I read this in a book one time, that building great companies requires you to build great people first. And you're building great people when those people leave to go on to do better things. So, I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily say Chick-fil-A is 100% responsible for your individualized success, but they definitely did not detract from you becoming a success. And I think that that's what makes companies great, is that they build great people and they facilitate the process for people to actually self-actualize and become the best that they can possibly be. And that's what, regardless of whether you have 100 or 100,000 employees, if you can build great people, your company can be great and can be excellent and can really impact this world.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it took me a long time to find a career, so I've actually worked in a lot of places, but the three places that created significant momentum for me were Chick-fil-A. Just that focus on customer service and focus on just, I was really fortunate. I got to be a team lead, and so there was a lot of leadership growth there. Right. And then the boss would come in and he'd be like, he taught me a lot of lessons, like, you can't get stuck down in one position. You as a leader need to be stepping back so you can jump in and help anybody who needs help at any time. Like, I don't want you to be like stuck with a customer unless it's a customer problem. Like, but ringing people up on a register, because if you're ringing people up on the register and something else goes wrong, you're not going to be able to help them. and so that was like such a momentum, like, pivotal moment in my leadership, career. That, and just the level of importances of being able to see the big picture and the little picture. Because at Chick-fil-A, you get caught up in the little activities because you got to keep them going when you're having $1,000 hour, which, 25 years ago or whenever I was there, that was a big hour. But what's happening in the dining room? Right. Like, so you're so worried about getting the lines out. Are you paying attention to the dining room, and are the customers still having a positive experience there? Or are your employees getting to their breaks on time so that they're getting a break, because it's really tough? And, so that was really important. And then the next one was Target. And Target wasn't necessarily a fabulous place for me to work at. I think they do. I don't agree with all the things they've been doing lately, but when I was there, they do a lot of things right. They do create, I think they are trying to create that tribe-like culture. And I didn't fit in the tribe. What they value and what I valued ended up being misaligned, but I learned a lot there. Because I'm very much an executor. Like, this is what we have to do. This is how where we have to go. And while they say they value execution, they put a higher priority on what they call fast, fun, and friendly. And the fun and friendly for me is maybe not as high. But still, the level of growth was, huge in that time, because what I learned there was just people can leave, right, and go work for Walmart. So now, like you were talking about, the importance and the value on the individual becomes so, like, how am I engaging with each and every employee so that they feel connected to me and to this company, so that they don't go work for Walmart. And then the final one was Cigna Healthcare. And that's when I wrote a blog on how to quit a job you love, or something like that. Or when is it time to quit a job you love? Because I absolutely love that job, because that's finally when I found what I love to do. And this is where I think it touches to what you're talking about, where they did things so well, but there came a point where I'm like, I have bigger dreams than this. And so I didn't want to leave them, because I love the people I worked for. I was treated well. I had growth opportunities, but I was like, but there's so much more. And now it's time to go. And that's how I think what you were saying is how you want every person to leave, is probably in that way.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that I say, we have this huddle every day, and I love to tell people that if you leave, I want you to leave upwards, not laterally. I don't want you to leave here to go somewhere laterally, because that means I made a mistake. I did something wrong. So it wasn't that your dream couldn't be fulfilled here. It's that you didn't see that this company aligned with you, or that we made a mistake. And so I want to see you go up. And so when I see employees leave and they go to law school and become lawyers, or they leave and they start their own business, or they leave and they start investing in real estate, that to me, it brings me great joy, because I know that we did our job, and at least at the very minimum, even if we didn't build them up, we didn't tear them down. And I think that we live in an environment today, and this is probably a paradigm shift, at least in my life, maybe should be in everyone's life if it hasn't gotten there yet. But we live in an environment today where the way you treat people and the experience that people have in your company is your responsibility. I don't think that the old way of just grinding people to death is the ethical and moral way to run a company. I think the way you run a company is that you build a company where people actually enjoy coming to work. And now you're not going to hit the mark every time, but if you do it enough, you can be satisfied that your life and your company actually made a true difference, and not just profit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's kind of like that. What's your purpose beyond profit? Like, profit should be it should be the symptom or the result, I guess, of the activities that you're doing, but it's not, it shouldn't be the drive. And I think sometimes the problem with the American financial system and the stock market is that, our stockholders are so focused on short-term results, that stocks can move up and down just by, one change in a quarterly report. Actually, I think does a lot of harm to our businesses, because they make short-term decisions. I really appreciate more I guess, in the Japanese economy in that regard, where they're much more focused on the 30-year and the 50-year, and short-term blips are not as impactful because you look at them as blips,
Right.
because yeah, it's the long-term vision, and sometimes you have to have short-term pain to reach the long-term vision, and I don't think we allow for that.
I mean, if you equate it to like working out, you always have to have short-term gain for the long-term vision. I mean, that's the whole concept of sacrifice, right? Sacrifice is giving up what you want today for what you want in the future, and it's no different than savings. If you save today, you give up buying what you want today, so that one day in the future you have money to live off of. And I think that with a more long-term of an approach, you take in building your company and growing your career, the more likely it is that you'll have the desired outcome that you want in the future. And when I coach young people, and they come to me and they're graduating college and they say, what should I do? And I always tell them, go to a company, and even if you don't know what you want to do, stay there at least a significant amount of time so you can learn something.
Mm.
Don't jump from company. I see this all the time. I see, 25, 26-year-olds, and they come to me and they've had 8 jobs and all of them are 8 months. And it's like, I have no reliability that you're going to be here at any significant of time. And so my investment in you may not pay off.
Mm.
And I'm not even talking about the financial investment. I'm talking about the relational investment, the emotional investment, the educational investment may not pay off. And so stay somewhere, grow with it, give it a couple of years, give it 3 years, learn something, go through the seasons of life in this company, and then take what you have and build upon it. And then you can go somewhere else if it's not the place you want. But we live in a world where everyone's being encouraged to you just chase happiness. And if you're not happy, leave. And now people are just finding themselves with resumes that look like a bunch of temporary jobs, on their resume. So I don't think that's fruitful. And the idea that you're talking about, that sometimes the short-term pain is worth it in the long run, is what I'm exactly trying to say, is that as an employee of a company, sometimes that short-term staying there for 2 or 3 years, 4 years is what you need to get the bigger outcome 20 years from now, 25 years from now, when you can show on your resume that you stick it out even through tough times.
Oh, so that's not me. I'm not saying I disagree, but that was exactly the challenge I had. I mean, I think there were many times I didn't stay with a job more than a year, and until starting this company, I had never been with a company for more than 3 years. And obviously I've found the upside to it at this point, right? But I can definitely, taking it back to trying to get maybe my first project management job was actually really difficult, because I had done a lot of different things and then trying to translate that to project management. So I think my recommendation to those people would maybe be take a pause even and try to find ways to expose yourself to different industries, because that's what turned out to be my problem. Is that I didn't find the work that was just clicking. I had not been exposed to these ideas. I hadn't even heard of project management, like, until I was in MBA, which I didn't do my MBA right away. So it was like I was 30, probably 28, 29 years old when I discovered what project management even was. Because my dad was a lawyer, and my mom worked at the bank, and my mom worked in HR, and and so you're got this really narrow exposure to what careers are even possible. And so, yeah, I think my recommendation would be like, maybe join some associations, right? Before you start job hopping, maybe join some associations and feel out different jobs, like, SHRM, or the legal has continuing education. I don't know what their organization's called, but, and then PMI for project management, and you can start testing the waters without making a jump.
I mean, I agree. Like, you can join an organization and become part of their team. If you think that finances is maybe the route for you, go and become the bookkeeper of a local nonprofit. If you think that marketing's your thing, volunteer some hours and market for a small organization who would love to have you market. Like, don't just like quit every single job. And I get it that some people do that and do become successful. And so we're always going to the survivor bias, like that person survived, so therefore I can survive kind of thing. But there's so many people who get stuck in a rut. Like they spend year after year after year looking for a new job and a new job and a new job, and they never become truly satisfied because they never build any kind of expertise in anything. And so you can find some of those things without having to quit your job. Just stick it through, and you'd be surprised that there's a lot of opportunities for you to figure out what you want to do in life without having to job hunt, hop. And so that, I mean, a combination of what we're recommending probably works for a large majority of people.
It's funny because on the last episode of the show, which hasn't aired yet, but we're talking about it's still, there is a symptom. There is this symptom out there of the newer generations, maybe it started to die with Gen X, but then into the millennials and Gen Z, is this lack of grittiness. Of you just do the job because you need to do the job. And I mean, I'm the same way. Like, I'm not trying to call anybody out. I have a hard time with, this isn't fulfilling. I want to go do something else. And maybe there's light at the end of the tunnel. We're very much, this microwave culture now, right? I mean, we do it with everything. We do it with relationships, marriages, work. It's like, oh, things are hard, so might as well quit and find something else. And the generations before, you look at like my grandparents who'd been married 50 years or whatever, there was no magic thing. Like they had the same issues as everybody else probably actually has. Yes. But they stick it out and they work it through and they make it to the other side. And I guess it looks different on the other side, but it's hard to see that when you're in the middle of it, which is what I think you're saying about work.
I mean, being in it's hard to see the promised land when you're in the desert. There's no doubt about that. And I think that sticking it out is definitely, it's something that's it's a lost art for sure. And you don't see people sticking it out. But recently when I was listening to something, and it said that the reason people don't stick it out is because they're in search of happiness instead of in search of meaning. Yeah. And see, if you're in constant search of happiness, then anytime something doesn't make you happy, then you're just going to bolt from there. But if you're in search of meaning, then happiness is not a prerequisite for being somewhere. And I remember growing in my career, I was at one company for 15 years before I started my own law firm. And I was not happy every single day. I was not happy every single month or year, but I was in search of meaning. I wanted my life to mean something more than just work. And that's what kept me at the company. Because I did believe, going back to earlier part of the show, I did believe that I could accomplish my dreams and goals in that company at the time. And so I was looking for meaning, not for happiness, even when I was unhappy. And today I credit a large part of my success to the fact that I stayed that length of time, because I became a reliable and dependable person. And when people know you're willing to stay somewhere 15 years, they're willing to lock arms with you for a very long period of time. And I have, I've been in my new law firm now for almost 6 years. And I have employees that I hired when I first started that still work for me. Many employees, some of my best employees and closest employees have been with me 5 and 6 years. And it's because I believe, and maybe if we interviewed them, they'd say it's a different reason, but I believe it's because I both have shown my commitment to them, but they also see an opportunity for growth with us. And I think that ultimately matters when you're in a company.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess we've kind of covered a few things, but so, when we were talking about predictability, we were talking about finding the right systems and processes, making sure that those systems and processes are communicated to everybody and everybody's now doing it on a repeatable basis. And then getting the right leadership in there to make sure people are trained and have the resources they need. Any symptoms that you see, I guess, of people that where it's not going well, like things that people should look for, saying, oh, we might have a problem here?
I mean, the primary symptom that you're going to see I mean, it's a really complicated question that, because it depends on what's the issue that you're trying to solve. But generally speaking, if you're having some issues in operations, what you're going to see is you're going to see a great inefficiency. And I like to look at something called revenue per employee. If you look at the Small Business Administration, which actually classifies any business under 100 million in revenue as a small business, you will find that the average revenue per employee that you should be generating in a business is about $200,000 per employee. So if you look at an organization and you realize you're not generating $200,000 in revenue per employee, there may be some issues going on with the system. Maybe it's not efficient enough. Maybe they don't have the right tools and resources. Another thing is disengagement of employees is a symptom that there's something going wrong. Dissatisfaction. We like to do something called the Net Promoter Score with our employees and clients. Like how likely are you willing to, how likely are you to refer someone to work here? If your Net Promoter Score is low, very likely you have a problem going on. Those are some of the symptoms that you would see on the employee side. And then on the revenue side or the marketing side or the sales side, it's just objective numbers. Are the numbers hitting the industry standard? If they're not, then there's probably those are leading and lagging indicators that something is going wrong, and you have to figure out what needs to be changed to turn it around. And that's the key really to growing your business.
Excellent. Well, this has been a fun conversation. What 3 things do you want to leave top of mind for our audience?
I want to leave that leadership is important. Leadership matters. It's the most important part of growing any business. Any person can be a leader, whether they own the business or they work in the corporate world. It's just a matter of really loving what you do, loving the people who you serve, and really looking for meaningness and not just being happy. And I think the third thing is that companies grow when they dedicate themselves to building people and not just to building profits.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time. How can folks learn more about what you do or get in contact with you?
I have a website. It's luisscottjr.com. Luis, it's LuisScottJr.com. They can find all my links, my social media. They can find my books. I've written 3 books, and they can also book me for guest speaking as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
And to our audience, until next time, keep your organizations healthy.